A fight is brewing between Ottawa and BC Premier David Eby.
They've offered us nothing. $0.
I think people in the West are used to the special treatment for Quebec and Ontario, but eventually it gets to be too much.
BC is done playing nice with Ottawa's rigged game. The province just launched a nuclear legal strike against federal equalization payments, officially backing a legal challenge that sent shockwaves through the capital. BC is showing Ottawa that enough is enough, and they are going to become a sovereign nation.
I cannot understand how that could happen. I cannot understand why we cannot get a per capita share at a minimum.
When a traditionally moderate province starts constitutional challenges and openly accuses Ottawa of showering Ontario and Quebec with money, while BC gets nothing, massive changes are brewing. Listen, I've been watching Canadian politics for years, and I can tell you this. When BC starts talking about constitutional challenges and structural unfairness, you know something unprecedented is about to happen.
$750 million for Quebec to deal with immigration pressures from the federal government. They've offered us nothing. $0.
BC's economic reality exposes Ottawa's fundamentally unfair system. Equalization payments total $26.2 billion in 2025 to 2026, with Quebec receiving $13.9 billion, a staggering 53% of all payments. BC gets zero despite contributing massively to the national GDP through natural resources, technology, and Pacific trade.
It's time for them to up the federal subsidy that is unchanged for almost 20 years in British Columbia, while East Coast fare users continue to see benefits from the federal government.
The facts reveal BC's powerhouse status that Ottawa deliberately ignores. The province generates $295 billion in GDP annually, ranking third nationally. BC's tech sector alone employs 106,000 people and contributes $29.4 billion yearly. The Port of Vancouver handles $240 billion in trade annually, 30% of Canada's total trade volume. Yet somehow this economic engine doesn't deserve equalization support.
It was kicked off on Monday when the Prime Minister announced $750 million to help Quebec deal.
Meanwhile, Ottawa's favoritism becomes crystal clear through infrastructure funding disparities. Federal support for Marine Atlantic reaches $130 million, while BC Ferries receives only $37.8 million. Despite serving double the population and carrying critical economic importance. Premier Eby calls this a structural unfairness, and he's absolutely right. What's really happening here is that Eby's strategy mirrors Alberta's successful sovereignty playbook perfectly. First, public complaints about unfair treatment. Second, legal challenges to federal authority. Third, constitutional confrontation. Danielle Smith proved provinces can challenge Ottawa and win. Eby is taking detailed notes.
Even British Columbia just made history by formally coordinating their separation strategy from the rest of Canada.
While Premier Eby publicly says talk of Western Canada separation needs to stop, his actions tell a completely different story. You don't challenge the federal equalization system in court unless you're prepared to play hardball. And you definitely don't accuse Ottawa of favoritism unless you're building a case for why your province deserves independence.
BC controls critical Pacific trade routes and natural resources.
What separates BC's position is its complete economic independence. The province exports $46.8 billion in goods annually, including $8.4 billion in energy products. BC's mining sector produces $13.4 billion yearly, while agriculture contributes $4.6 billion. Tourism adds another $22.3 billion to provincial coffers. This isn't a province that needs federal handouts. This is a province that's subsidizing everyone else.
20%. That involves a level of support that would have been unthinkable just years ago.
Recent polling data reveals explosive growth in Western alienation. Support for increased provincial autonomy reached 67% in BC, according to 2024 surveys. Additionally, 31% of British Columbians now support exploring all options regarding federal relationships, the highest level ever recorded. The 2024 British Columbia election saw a broad political realignment with a resurgence for the Conservative Party of British Columbia, proving voters want anti-establishment change. Meanwhile, BC contributes $20.4 billion annually to federal revenues, but receives only $14.2 billion back, a net loss of $6.2 billion every year. How long would you put up with that mathematical theft? If you're finding this analysis eye-opening, smash that subscribe button, because this separation story is just getting started.
The first shipment of LNG from BC's coast will make a material difference in Canada's GDP, the largest private sector investment in Canadian history.
BC's fiscal capacity completely demolishes separation myths. The province maintains a $2.9 billion surplus in 2025 while running efficient public services. BC's debt-to-GDP ratio sits at just 16.8%, among Canada's lowest. Provincial credit rating remains AAA, proving unshakable economic stability.
Western Canada contributes 40% of all Canadian exports, but they only have 30% of the population.
Geographic advantages make BC separation not just viable, but inevitable. The province controls 27,000 kilometers of coastline and manages 19 major ports. BC connects directly to Asia-Pacific markets worth $31 trillion annually. Vancouver International Airport handles 26.4 million passengers yearly, generating $16.3 billion in economic activity.
In terms of traditional energy projects, we also have Cedar LNG and Silism's LNG that are reaching final investment decision or are in construction.
BC Hydro launched a new power call in 2025, securing complete energy independence. The province generates 98% of its electricity from renewable sources, making it entirely self-sufficient. BC also controls 25% of Canada's total forest resources and produces $13.2 billion in forestry exports annually. Why would an energy-independent, economically self-sufficient province need Ottawa's permission for anything? EB's strategic infrastructure gambit.
In the next few days, British Columbia will be marking the first cargo of LNG Canada, shipping from the west coast of British Columbia, important distinction, to international markets around the world.
Here's where Premier EB gets really clever with his recent project announcements. BC just unveiled massive infrastructure investments that would make Ottawa panic if the province ever left Confederation. We're talking about critical LNG projects, expanded port facilities, and new trade corridors that connect Canada to Asia-Pacific markets worth trillions.
The first shipment of LNG from BC's coast will make a material difference in Canada's GDP, the largest private sector investment in Canadian history.
EB announced new LNG export terminals that will generate $40 billion in economic activity over the next decade. These aren't just provincial projects. They're Canada's gateway to Asian energy markets. If BC takes these projects and goes independent, Ottawa loses its primary Pacific trade infrastructure overnight. The province also launched expanded container terminal projects at Vancouver ports, increasing capacity by 60%. This infrastructure handles nearly 1/3 of Canada's total trade volume. Without BC, Canada becomes a landlocked trading nation dependent on American ports for Pacific access.
Pacific Northwest Economic Region Conference, we worked in close partnership with those states for many, many years on flood mitigation, economic growth, the Cascadia Corridor.
Most devastating for Ottawa would be losing BC's clean energy corridor projects. EB's government is building transmission lines that could power half of Western North America with clean electricity. Independent BC could sell this power directly to California and Washington State, bypassing Canada entirely and generating billions in revenue that currently flows through federal systems.
I think there's other interest around investment in British Columbia and Alberta.
EB's coalition-building strategy gains dangerous momentum for Ottawa. BC partnered with Newfoundland, challenging equalization formulas. Saskatchewan joined discussions about federal overreach. Alberta's Sovereignty Act success provides the proven legal blueprint. Western premiers now coordinate policies independently of Ottawa. That's not cooperation, that's confederation breakdown.
Premier Smith can cross that hurdle of identifying a proponent and an actual project, then let's have that conversation.
What I find most telling is how BC politicians openly discuss cooperation with other provinces to challenge Ottawa. BC may work with Newfoundland and Labrador on a court challenge of federal equalization payments. Building coalitions against federal power is exactly how successful independence movements start. When provinces start coordinating their challenges to federal authority, that's not just political theater. That's the foundation for a constitutional crisis. The separation earthquake that started in Alberta is spreading west, and British Columbia might just be the province that brings down the entire Canadian Federation. The perfect storm for independence.
And the timing, it is absolutely devastating for the Ottawa establishment.
The timing couldn't be more perfect for BC independence. With Alberta already challenging federal authority and winning, with Western separatist sentiment at an all-time high, and with BC finally finding its voice against Ottawa's favoritism, all the pieces are falling into place for something unprecedented in Canadian history.
BC will be the economic engine, frankly, of the new economy that we're building here in Canada because of our port access to markets, the resources we have.
BC's economic fundamentals are absolutely rock solid for independence. They've got natural resources, technology, Pacific trade access, energy independence, and a diversified economy that doesn't rely on federal transfers. In fact, they're subsidizing other provinces instead of receiving help themselves. From a pure economic standpoint, BC would be better off without Canada.
We have to watch the federal government show up on the East Coast and subsidize ferry users that already get a $300 subsidy per each $1 that a BC ferry user gets.
But here's the kicker that nobody in mainstream media wants to acknowledge. Separatist sentiment is growing in Western Canada, and BC is watching Alberta's success with increasing interest. Premier Ebi calls for more federal funding for BC ferries, citing structural unfairness. But this goes way deeper than ferry subsidies, folks. The nuclear option approaches. Mark my words, Premier EB's legal challenges and public complaints about structural unfairness are just the opening moves in a much larger game. BC is done being Ottawa's ATM while getting treated like a second-class province. Whether they go the Alberta route with sovereignty acts or take the even bolder step toward independence, one thing is crystal clear. The status quo is no longer acceptable.
We're going to facilitate access for other provinces too, to get to those markets just as we always have.
What makes this moment so explosive is BC's recent shift from begging Ottawa for scraps to positioning itself as Canada's future economic engine while simultaneously challenging federal authority. That's not the language of a province planning to stay quiet and compliant forever.
Eastern provinces while receiving zero back. So they're basically subsidizing the eastern provinces.
Instead of political theater, we're watching the methodical construction of a legal and economic case for independence. When you can show British Columbians that their province gets treated like a second-class citizen despite being an economic powerhouse, separation doesn't sound radical anymore. It sounds like economic common sense. The separation earthquake that started in Alberta is spreading west, and British Columbia might just be the province that brings down the entire Canadian Federation. Let me know in the comments if you think BC has what it takes to follow through on independence. Hit that subscribe button for more breaking analysis on Canada's constitutional crisis.